I, 32M, have spent the last 8 years grinding as a logistics account executive. I don't take vacations, I don't leave at 5 p.m., and I sure as hell don't play the corporate politics game. My manager, 48M, is the exact opposite. He's a guy who wears suits that cost more than my car, but hasn't booked a new client since the Obama administration. He survives by managing up and taking credit for every win his team brings in. 6 months ago, I landed the whale. We're talking about a global manufacturing firm with a shipping spend of roughly $5 million a year. This wasn't a hand-me-down lead. I spent 14 months cold calling, flying out on my own dime, and building a relationship with their director of operations. When the contract finally hit my desk, I felt like I had finally secured my future. The commission alone was going to pay off my mortgage. The trouble started the Monday after the contract was signed. My manager called me into his glass-walled office. He didn't congratulate me. He didn't mention the commission. He just slid a piece of paper across his desk. It was an internal account reassignment form. "I'm taking over the lead on this one," my manager said, leaning back and smoothing his tie. "A client of this scale needs executive-level oversight. You'll stay on as the secondary support admin. You'll still get a small percentage of the service fee, of course." I looked at the form. My name was crossed out. His was in the primary slot. "A small percentage?" I asked. "The company policy is 10% on new business for the lead generator. You're trying to move me to the 1% support tier. That's a $450,000 difference, Mike." He bristled when I used his name. "It's about what's best for the client. They need to know they're dealing with the top of the food chain. You're a grinder. You're great at the grunt work, but you don't have the polish for a $5 million account. Sign the form, or we're going to have a very difficult conversation about your collaboration metrics during your next review." This was the first act of entitlement. He wasn't just stealing the credit. He was stealing the life-changing money I had earned. I didn't sign it. I walked out and went straight to my desk. Within an hour, I realized he had already contacted the client. He sent them an email introducing himself as the primary relationship manager and told them I had been transitioned to a different department, but would be assisting in the background. I knew how this worked. In the U.S., most employment is at will, but commission structures are usually governed by the signed offer letter and the company's written compensation plan. I pulled my original contract from my home safe that night. My contract explicitly stated that the originating agent retains the primary commission for the life of the account, as long as they are employed by the firm. The next day, my manager tried a dirty trick. He called a team meeting and announced that due to restructuring, all large accounts would now be pooled, with the manager taking a 50% cut of all commissions to distribute for office overhead. It was a blatant, illegal move to circumvent the company's own bylaws just to get his hands on my whale. I sat there silent, watching him gloat. He thought he had me trapped. He thought I was too scared of losing my job to fight back. He had no idea that while he was busy pooling my money, I was already on the phone with the client's director of operations. I told the director the truth. I didn't bash the company, but I told him I was leaving the firm, and that the executive oversight my manager promised was actually a mask for the fact that the person who knew their supply chain inside and out was being pushed out. "If you go, we go," the director told me. "We signed with this firm because of your data models and your midnight troubleshooting. I don't even know who this other guy is." I handed in my resignation 2 days later. My manager's face went from smug to panicked in about 3 seconds. "You can't quit," he stammered. "You have a non-compete." "Actually," I said, dropping a copy of the 2024 FTC ruling and the specific labor laws of our state on his desk, "my non-compete is geographically overbroad and covers roles I don't even perform. It's legally unenforceable. Also, you breached my compensation contract by attempting to reassign the account without cause. I'm done." As I walked out, he followed me to the elevator, shouting about how I'd never work in this industry again. He was so loud that the entire office stopped to watch. "That account stays here," he screamed. "It's company property. Good luck servicing it," I said as the doors closed. The client just sent over their 30-day notice of termination. The look on his face was better than any commission check. He had gambled his entire branch's quarterly goal on stealing my one client, and he had just lost both. But that was only the beginning. I wasn't just quitting, I was starting my own brokerage, and I was taking his entire foundation with me. After I walked out of that elevator, the silence in my home office was a sharp contrast to the shouting match at the branch. I didn't have time to celebrate. My manager wasn't the type to take a loss quietly. He spent the first 48 hours after my resignation spiraling into a series of dirty tricks that showed exactly how desperate he was. He didn't just stop at the non-compete threat. He sent an internal memo to the entire branch people I'd worked with for years, claiming I had been fired for unethical conduct and attempted theft of company property. He was trying to poison the well before I could even set up my desk. Then came the emails to the client. He sent 3 consecutive messages to the director of operations, each one more unhinged than the last. He claimed I was under a federal investigation for data manipulation, and that if the client followed me to my new brokerage, they would be named as co-conspirators in a trade secret lawsuit. The director of operations called me, laughing. "The guy sounds like he's having a breakdown, man. He's promising us a 20% discount if we stay, but he can't even explain how the tracking software works. He keeps calling it the magic box." This was the manager's second major act of entitlement. He believed that because he held a title, he owned the reality of the situation. He thought he could lie his way into keeping a $5 million account he hadn't lifted a finger to build. By Wednesday, the first legal volley arrived. A courier showed up at my door with a thick envelope. My manager hadn't just gone to the company's legal department. He had hired a private bulldog firm to send a cease and desist. It was 8 pages of legal jargon accusing me of tortious interference and demanding I hand over my personal phone and laptop for forensic imaging to ensure I hadn't stolen the company's proprietary database. I called my own attorney, a guy who specializes in employment law and high-stakes transitions. He looked at the letter and the manager's restructuring memo from the week before and just shook his head. In the United States, specifically under the Defend Trade Secrets Act (DTSA), they have to prove you actually took something secret and used it, my lawyer explained. But more importantly, your manager's attempt to retroactively change your commission structure is a clear violation of the Wage Payment and Collection Act. He handed us the keys to the kingdom when he put that pooling plan in writing. That's called a material breach of your employment agreement. Under the law, once a company breaches its own contract with you, many of your restrictive covenants, like that non-compete he was waving around, can become completely void. I didn't blink. I didn't send back a defensive letter. Instead, I sent a notice of claim back to the company's corporate headquarters, bypassing my manager entirely. I laid out the evidence: the recorded meeting where he demanded my account, the signed contract he tried to ignore, and the emails he sent to the client that were clearly defamatory. The corporate office panicked. They knew my manager was a liability, but he wasn't done being a villain. On Friday, he tried his most pathetic move yet. He called my personal cell from an unknown number. "Listen," he said, his voice dropping the executive act and sounding purely predatory. "I know you think you've got this one, but I've already told the regional VP that the $5 million contract was actually a result of my old connections, and you just handled the paperwork. If you don't sign that account back over to the branch by Monday, I'm going to make sure the state licensing board hears about your unauthorized use of company data. You'll never hold a broker's license again." "Are you finished?" I asked. "I'm just getting started," he spat. "Good," I said, "because I've been recording this call. In this state, we're a one-party consent jurisdiction for recordings. You just committed extortion on a recorded line, Mike." The silence on the other end was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. I hung up and immediately forwarded the recording to my lawyer and the corporate HR director. While he was busy trying to bury me in lies, I was finishing the paperwork for my new firm. I had already secured a small office space and a skeleton crew, but I wasn't just taking the $5 million whale. I had 3 other accounts worth another $2 million combined, waiting for the word that I was officially open. My manager had built his entire quarterly projection on my back. Without me, and without that $5 million account, his branch was looking at a 60% deficit. He had spent the company's marketing budget for the next year on launch parties for an account he didn't own. The confrontation was coming. He thought he was the hunter, but he was just a man standing on a sinking pier, watching the tide go out. This is where the executive oversight Mike bragged about started to rot from the inside out. While he was busy trying to intimidate me, my lawyer and I had been digging. We discovered that Mike hadn't just been stealing credit. He'd been using the branch's client entertainment fund to subsidize a lifestyle he couldn't afford. The regional VP called me into a private Zoom session. "We've reviewed the recording you sent," she said, her voice flat. "And we've reviewed the reassignment forms. We've also noticed that Mike has billed the company for 3 strategy dinners with the $5 million client that the client claims never happened. This was Mike's 3rd act of entitlement, financial fraud. He thought he was so untouchable that he could use the company's money to wine and dine his own friends while telling the board it was relationship building for the account I had landed." Mike was called into the conference room. He didn't know I was on the line listening. He started his usual routine. "Look, the kid is talented, but he's unstable. He's trying to sabotage the branch because he couldn't handle the pressure of a big account. I had to step in to save the firm's reputation. The client is just confused because of the lies he's been telling." "The client isn't confused, Mike," the VP interrupted. She played the recording of him threatening my license. The silence that followed was heavy. I could almost hear Mike's sweat hitting the mahogany table. That was taken out of context," he stammered. "I was trying to protect company secrets. He's taking a $5 million book of business to a competitor." "He isn't going to a competitor," the VP said. "He started his own firm. And legally, because you breached his commission contract by attempting to reallocate his earnings to yourself, his non-compete is null and void. We are now facing a $10 million lawsuit from his counsel for wage theft and defamation." Mike's entitlement finally turned into pure, unadulterated cowardice. "I was doing it for the branch. Our numbers were down. If we didn't get that commission in our bucket, the regional office would have flagged us for underperformance." He had admitted it. He didn't care about the client, the company, or the law. He only cared about his own managerial metrics. But I wasn't just going for a settlement. I wanted the branch gone. Why? Because Mike had spent years building a culture of trickle-up success, where the junior brokers did all the work while the senior managers sat on their hands. I sent one final email to the entire brokerage team, the grinders who were still stuck in that office. I didn't tell them to quit. I just sent them a link to my new firm's About Us page, which featured a transparent, tiered commission structure where the person who lands the deal keeps 90% of the cut. No management pools. No overhead fees. By the time the meeting in the conference room ended, 4 other senior brokers had sent in their resignations. The regional VP turned back to the camera. "He's being placed on administrative leave effective immediately, pending a full audit of the branch's expenses. We'd like to offer you a settlement to drop the defamation claim." "I'm not interested in a settlement," I said. "I'm interested in the truth. I'll see you in court for the unpaid commissions, and I'll see Mike at the ethics hearing." Mike tried one last dirty trick before he was escorted out. He tried to wipe the branch's main server, thinking he could destroy the evidence of his expense fraud. What he didn't know was that as the senior account executive, I had mirrored the logs for the $5 million account months ago to ensure my own records were safe. He didn't just fail to delete the evidence. He added destruction of company property to his growing list of problems. The branch was now a shell. The $5 million whale was gone. The top brokers were gone. And Mike was left holding a cardboard box of his belongings while security watched him walk to his car. The satisfying revenge was just starting to simmer. He thought he was the architect of my downfall, but he had just spent the last 6 months building his own prison, The weeks leading up to the ethics hearing and the official filing of my civil suit were a chaotic blur of legal discovery and pure, unadulterated desperation from the company. My manager, now officially the former manager, wasn't just fighting for his job anymore. He was fighting to keep his professional license and stay out of a courtroom. He tried one last entitled Hail Mary. He showed up at my new office unannounced at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was alone, finishing up some logistics routing for the $5 million client. He didn't look like the polished executive anymore. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes were bloodshot, and he smelled like a midday bar crawl. "You have to stop this," he said, his voice cracking as he stood in my doorway. "I've been in this industry for 20 years. You're destroying a man's entire legacy over a few $100,000. I have a mortgage. My kid is in private school. Does that mean nothing to you? It meant nothing to you when you tried to steal my house and my career, Mike," I said, not looking up from my screen. "You didn't see me as a person with a life. You saw me as an ATM. Now the ATM is closed. I'll give you the money," he shouted, slamming his hand on my desk. "I'll personally sign over my severance if you tell the licensing board it was all a misunderstanding. If I lose my license, I'm done. I can't even work as a junior broker. You should have thought about that before you threatened to frame me for data theft," I replied. I picked up my desk phone. "Leave now, or I'm calling the police for trespassing." He left, but not before screaming that I was a traitor, and that the industry would eventually spit me out just like he did. It was the same old song. He truly believed he was the victim of my success rather than the architect of his own failure. The ethics hearing was held at the state capitol. The licensing board doesn't play games. They have a zero-tolerance policy for moral turpitude, which includes extortion and financial fraud. Mike showed up with a public defender because he could no longer afford his bulldog private attorney. I sat across from him and laid out the timeline. I produced the mirrored logs showing he had accessed my account 114 times in 48 hours to try and change the contact information. I played the recordings. I showed the board the reassignment form where he had literally used whiteout to remove my name. The board's lead investigator looked at Mike. "Mr. Manager, in your 20 years of experience, have you ever seen a legitimate account reassignment occur without a written performance review or a signed acknowledgement from the originating agent?" Mike stammered. "It was an emergency measure. The client was at risk of leaving. The client is currently in the back of this room," the investigator said, "and he has provided a sworn affidavit stating that the only risk to the account was your continued interference." The board didn't even deliberate for more than 20 minutes. They issued a permanent revocation of his broker's license. In the world of logistics and finance, that is a professional death sentence. He can't even work as an independent consultant. He is legally barred from the industry for life. But the final blow, the one that really felt like justice, wasn't just Mike's downfall. It was the full-fledged satisfying revenge on the branch itself. The corporate office realized that the branch was now a toxic asset. Without the $5 million whale, and with the top 80% of their revenue-generating brokers having already jumped ship to join my new firm, the branch's overhead was triple its income. The regional VP called me 2 days after the hearing. "We're closing the branch," she told me. The audit found that Mike had misappropriated nearly $150,000 in entertainment funds over 3 years. "We're liquidating the assets. Since you're the primary creditor in the wage theft suit, we'd like to offer you the remaining office equipment and the lease at a 90% discount to settle the claim." I took the deal. I walked back into that old office, the one where Mike had shouted at me by the elevator, not as a grinder, but as the new landlord. I watched as the corporate team ripped Mike's name off the glass door. I hired the remaining support staff who had been under Mike's thumb, gave them all 20% raises, and officially absorbed the space into my new brokerage. The story ends with me sitting in Mike's old office, his actual office. The view is better from this side of the desk. Mike is currently facing a civil suit from the corporation to recoup the $150,000 he stole, and his house is on the market. He tried to steal a $5 million client and ended up losing his license, his house, and the very branch he tried to protect. He wanted executive oversight. He got it. The state and the corporation oversaw every single one of his lies until there was nothing left. Subscribe if you want to see the photo of the new sign I put on his old door. I hear Mike is looking for work in retail, and I'm tempted to send him a lack of dedication application. 1 year has passed since I stood in that glass-walled office and watched the corporate world strip the nameplate off the door. My brokerage didn't just survive. It thrived. That $5 million client became a $12 million partner, and the brokers who followed me over are now making more in quarterly bonuses than they used to make in a year under the old regime. I don't think about the past often, but life has a way of forcing a final confrontation when you least expect it. Last Tuesday, I was driving to a satellite warehouse about 50 miles outside the city. I pulled into a dusty, middle-of-nowhere gas station to grab a coffee. As I walked toward the entrance, I saw a man in a neon yellow safety vest hosing down the pavement near the pumps. He was thinner, his hair was graying at the temples, and the executive posture was completely gone. It was Mike. He didn't see me at first. He was busy scrubbing a stubborn oil stain, his face tight with the kind of frustration that comes from doing a job you think is beneath you. I could have just walked past. I could have let him keep his dignity, such as it was. But then I remembered the way he looked at me when he tried to steal $450,000 of my hard-earned life. I remembered him calling my family's house and threatening my future. I stopped right in front of him. He looked up, squinting against the sun, and the recognition hit him like a physical blow. The hose slipped from his hand for a second, splashing water onto his worn-out work boots. "Tables turned, Mike," I said quietly. He stood up, wiping his hands on his vest. The old arrogance tried to flare up in his eyes, but it died out quickly. He looked at my car, then back at my suit, the kind of suit he used to tell me I wasn't polished enough to wear. "I heard the branch closed," he muttered, his voice raspy. "I heard you took the whole floor. Must be nice to build a kingdom on the back of a man you betrayed." "I didn't betray you, Mike. I outworked you. And then I outlegaled you. You didn't lose that branch because of me. You lost it because you thought the rules of gravity didn't apply to a guy with a manager title." He looked at the ground, the shame finally outweighing the anger. "I'm working 60 hours a week here, and at a warehouse just to keep the lawyers from taking my car. My wife left. My kid won't talk to me. Are you happy now? Is this the revenge you wanted?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized that the satisfaction didn't come from seeing him in a neon vest. It came from the fact that I didn't feel anything for him at all. No anger, no pity. He was just a stranger who had tried to play a high-stakes game without any cards. "I don't want anything from you, Mike," I said. "I already took the only thing that mattered, the proof that you were wrong about me." As I turned to walk into the store, he called out, "Wait." I stopped. He hesitated, his jaw working as he swallowed his last bit of pride. The pump is acting up. You have to pay inside first." "Sir." That "sir" hung in the air, heavy and bitter. The man who had spent a decade treating me like a grinder and a loser was now officially reporting to me as a customer. I nodded, went inside, paid for my coffee, and drove away. The branch is gone. The $5 million client is safe. And Mike is finally dedicated to something, even if it's just scrubbing oil off a gas station floor. The lesson here is simple. Never try to steal the harvest from the man who spent 14 months tilling the soil. You might end up with the dirt, but he's the one who keeps the grain. If you want to see the grand opening photos of our third office location, built entirely on the profits from the clients Mike said I couldn't handle, hit that subscribe button. I'm currently looking for a new lead admin, and I promise the interview won't involve a single neon vest.